All right, guys. Good morning to you. Sam here with a request from some members here to take a look at Bitcoin Cash to the U.S. dollar tether on Bittrex. So I've got the 4-hour up here, and I've just wicked off some key spots here. So we can look here. This is where it hits Bittrex over here, and we get the little pump, and then the long move sideways. And then I just wicked off the lowest low here that I could get before we start what now appears to be, a pretty technical, clean, clear Elliott wave structure. I mean, so far it's very technical, and a few things to point out here. So we can just work from this absolute low here and just do a straight fib pull just to see how that played. So there's our wave 1, and we come down into a wave 2. We do tap the Vegas wave. So we know that a wave 2 can be anywhere from between from the 50% to the 786. And then we start up here. So this was a little tricky here because there's some concern that we had an A and that we went into a 3-wave B. You can see it a little bit better on the 1 hour. But clearly we end up with this being our 1, then we get a 2 down here. And it's interesting how those fib counts can come back into play. So working from that swing low to high, then we come right back into our favorite little pocket between the 618 and the 65. But now looking at this, let's take that off here. So let's go down to the 1 hour, and we can see this a little bit better. Okay, so this was not the prettiest one wave I've ever seen, but it was there. So it looked more corrective. So we had this 3-wave here. So we really end up with a very shallow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we get it's not ideal, right? So you have to call it like you see it. I mean, there is a little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we end up with some sort of a 1, 2 into a 3, 4, 5. It's not gorgeous. It lacks the kind of symmetry that we might like to see in that, but nonetheless, there it is. We can get a 5-wave. We get the 4 is shallow, but it holds the wave 1. You'd have to go down to the 15 to see that little 1, 2 in there. We get a 3, 4, 5. It's not the prettiest count I've ever seen, but it's there. So we can be confident that's a good count. So we get the 2 down here, just shy of the 50. We go up here. Here's our 3, 4. Again, it's not the prettiest 1 wave I've ever seen. But how that relates to us now, well, we certainly want to wick off this wave 1 high. So let's get that wicked. And then we're going to measure just as we would for any wave 2, if indeed. So the assumption being if that's our wave 1, again, we're looking for that wave 2. And this is not unusual that we see similar depth here. So this went beyond the 618, 65, and shy of the 786. We did the same thing here. So we get an A, a B, and then this spike down into a C wave for a second. So again, just opening up here, just keeping it relatively simple. So we pull this off. So we get this. Let me scrunch up here because it's such a big move. Here, I gotta get it there. Bring it back down. Okay, so here are the tells, right? So this is really obvious. So we get this 1, 2, and then we start up and we launch here, and it almost doesn't really matter. So 1, 2, we get a 3, comes down our 4 into our 5. So it's there. We can see the 5 wave. So clearly we get a big 3 up here. That's the impulse wave. But here's the tell. So we come down here and we don't overlap the wave 1. So again, as I will often tell you, that does not happen by accident. That's not random. So the question becomes, is that our A wave or is that a complete correction? So the fact that we don't overlap this and it respects that prior resistance as a 1 wave gives us more confidence in this count, which is really the only point of going back to clarify this and say, can I see a 1 wave there? Because this, again, is not a random event. So that gives me confidence that my 1, 2 is solid. Well, up I go for the 3, and I can get the subdivision there. If I open that up even more, you can see we got the. So I'd probably count this as 1, 2. There's the 3, 4, 5 for my 3. This now comes down in 5. So what I see here is this. I see this same pattern that we've been experiencing in crypto, for the last 7-8 months. I see that. I see a shallow C, that same triangle pattern that we've seen over and over again in crypto, and there's no reason to not anticipate that it continues, given how consistent it's been. That we see it over and over again. So, normally you'd expect the C wave to come down here and at least challenge that A wave low, but we're seeing this over and over again. So you can see the A, B, C into my B wave, and that also, as I recall, was fairly technical. I believe we held the 50. Yeah, so we hover at the 50. So remember, there's always a fib fight from both directions. So you have to be, to some degree, cautious of this, in that we have an algo target down here on the short side, but we defer to the longer term. We defer to the longer time frame. So let me break this down a little bit. So even though we have this here pointing lower here, and that could happen, we always defer to the larger structure. So if I pull now from my 2 low here up to my, from my 2 low, I can get this right. So I've got my 2. Now I'm measuring for my 4. Well, it's very deep, right? So it's uncharacteristic for a fourth to go as deep as a 786. So when I see that, so the fact that we stay technical, that we do stay above the 786 and we stay above this one wave high, when I see it's uncharacteristically deep, so that makes me want to check it relative to other pivots. So what I will do, especially since we have the possibility of this turning into a diagonal, I want to check it all the way from back to the absolute lowest low where we started. Now that gets interesting to me. Again, these things don't happen randomly. So whenever you see a major pivot like that, it's always a good idea to go back and check prior swings, because the extreme move here suggests that we might be making a deeper correction relative to that low, to the start of the entire thing. So I always go back and check. I check this too. You want to check the dominant swings and see if there's anything that kind of gets your interest there. So the fact that that's a couple of ticks from the 618 tells me that not only, so I've got a good pivot here. That's basically what that's telling me. The fact that we don't overlap here, we're 786 from the 2 low, and from the start of the whole thing, we come up just a couple of ticks shy of the 618. Again, gives me confidence in this count, that my 1, 2, 3 now in my A wave here, I feel fairly confident in those. So if I pull that off, now the question mark is, so here, as we're looking at this now, trading it, so, you have this fib fight here, right? So from swing low to swing high, but then we have the same thing going back the other direction. So if I pull that off, knowing that we have potentially a B wave here with a shallow C, it's not typical Elliott trading, but it's what we're seeing in crypto. So we have to respect it potentially as our A, B, C with the shallow C wave. So how do we know, and how do we trade it, and how do we get a handle on it? Well, remember, there's going to be just a straight algo pull this direction as well. So we're going to pull here, and so you can see here yet again, just as we did here, it's a couple of ticks from the 618. So we have a fib fight between the swing high to low and this pivot, and the swing low to high and this pivot. So who wins? Well, it's kind of a wait and see here. If you were looking to get on the long side, and we're operating on the assumption that this is our C wave, well, now we can open this up even further, and this is a relatively low risk approach to the trade. So it's not unlike what we're seeing in Bitcoin. And listen, as fast as this is moving, let's look at it here. Okay, so if we have a one wave here, if we got a 1, 2, 3, 4 into a 5, well, we know the second can go, right, just as we looked at previously, can go anywhere from the 50 to the 786. And we've had a couple of 786s in a row, so it wouldn't surprise me if we went deeper here. But we'd be trading this on the long side on the assumption that I'm putting in my second here before I continue on with this trend. Now, if this low is broken here, then we have to reevaluate. Perhaps we have something more complex. We're in the fourth, where we can get a triangle, we can get complexity. We had a simple correction in the second. It was long, but we could see some complexity here. So if you were looking to get long, you're trading off this as a 1-2. So the reason I like that is because it's a relatively low risk, potentially high reward trade, because there's a clear point here where we invalidate the count. I wouldn't want to go too much beyond the 786, just because that's been our pattern. So if you were a buyer here at the 618, looking for some upside here to complete a 345, I might be a buyer at the 618, but I'd bring this up. I wouldn't take it too much beyond the 786. No reason to. If this is going to fail and we're going to so if we break this low, then we can't call it a 1-2 anymore. We can't have the 2 go below the start of it. So potentially you've got some entry here, but we might have to relabel this. We could be this, so we could have an A. Here's our B, and this could be 1-2 going the other direction. So just you got to be prepared for all those outcomes. So potentially, even though this looks more impulsive because we can get a good 5 wave, you have to allow for the possibility that we could be seeing this going the other direction. So looking at that, this could be 1, 2, we'd go 3, 4, and 5. That's possible. I think it's unlikely because this does not look corrective. It looks more like a 5 wave, but you can't eliminate it completely until we see how we respond here at this 618, and then if we're going to challenge the 786. This looks much more. So as a trader, we're playing the odds. This looks much more like a leading diagonal. Do we even get a diagonal? So this is why I would be willing to take the trade. Here's 1, 2, 3 diagonal into our 5th. So let me take that off. So we get a leading diagonal potentially into our 1. That looks exactly like what we have here. So the entry here, if you were a buyer just shy of the 618, you may be already filled. So because I can get a 1 wave, a leading diagonal out of that, I like the risk reward here. So I think this is very tradable here. If it holds, we got some significant upside. So if this is my 4 and this is my 1, 2, we're going up to challenge these highs if this count is going to hold. So this is just a nice place to get into a reasonable entry here with the risk reward. So there's almost 10 to 1, and that's just assuming, right? So the assumption would be that we're putting in the 1. So our count would look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me put that in a larger degree. So you got to prepare for either outcome. We know where it invalidates. So right now, you're just in the sweet spot of where you'd expect to find an entry. If it holds, great. If it gets stopped out, well, that's a very small loser. That's the reality of trading, right? You're playing the odds. Nothing says this couldn't just keep going down. There's no absolutes here. That's just a reasonable risk reward that you can trade based on the dominant count, which continues to be bullish, even though the wild card here is this 4th. That's the wild card because it's so shallow. But even within that, do you see how within that we can get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? That's why I think that's tradable right there. So that's a potential entry as we tap the 233 here. That's a reasonable spot to take a trade. Right? If I can get that kind of risk reward, I'll take that all day long, any day. Any day. If I get stopped out, that's not going to hurt me. It's just a jab. All right, so pretty straightforward on that one. I'll wrap it there. I'll be back with something else for you shortly.